The phrase 9 signs of Thales of Miletus that align with the biblical trumpets echoed like a whisper through the corridors of time, as if the ancient philosopher had left a hidden message for generations yet unborn. Though Thales lived centuries before the scriptures of Revelation were penned, his observations of nature, the cosmos, and the fragile heart of mankind seemed to intertwine with the warnings of the 7 trumpets described in the Bible. Those who studied both the fragments of his philosophy and the sacred texts began to notice strange parallels, patterns that could not easily be dismissed as coincidence. The first sign appeared in the heavens. Thales, who once predicted an eclipse, spoke of the sky as a canvas of divine signals. Centuries later, interpreters linked his words to the first trumpet, where fire and hail mixed with blood would descend. The alignment was uncanny. The philosophers awe before celestial shifts reflected the apocalyptic vision of judgment raining from above. The second sign was the sea. Thales famously believed that water was the origin of all things, the primordial substance from which life arose. Yet in Revelation, the second trumpet casts fire into the ocean, turning part of it into blood and destroying life within. What Thales saw as a source of creation, the trumpet revealed as a stage for destruction. Creation and devastation became 2 faces of the same eternal truth, that water holds both birth and death. The third sign lay in the rivers. Thales observed how water flowed endlessly, nourishing lands and shaping destinies. But the biblical vision spoke of the star called wormwood, falling upon the waters to make them bitter and deadly. The philosophers' reverence for flowing streams aligned with a prophecy that warned of their corruption, suggesting that what sustains life can also become the cause of great suffering. The fourth sign rose with the darkening of the sky. Thales measured the movement of stars, guiding sailors with constellations, seeking order in the heavens. But the trumpet declared a third of the sun, moon, and stars to be struck, shrouding the world in partial darkness. It was as if the same skies Thales trusted for navigation were now veiled, casting humanity into confusion and despair. The fifth sign came as torment. Thales spoke of the hidden essence of things, the unseen forces moving the world. Revelation described locusts like scorpions released to torment mankind, shadows of an invisible war. The philosopher's quest to understand invisible causes aligned eerily with the trumpet that revealed unseen horrors unleashed upon the earth. The sixth sign was war. Thales lived in a time when nations clashed, yet he sought wisdom beyond conflict. Still, the trumpet spoke of 4 angels released to kill a third of mankind, armies of unimaginable scale. Here, the philosopher's silence on the futility of endless wars seemed to foreshadow the thunder of prophecy, destruction unleashed not by human hands alone, but by cosmic decree. The seventh and final sign was the voice. For Thales, wisdom was not in shouting but in silence, in listening to the order beneath chaos. Yet the final trumpet spoke of great voices declaring the kingdoms of the world belonging to God. The philosopher's search for unity in the cosmos aligned with the revelation of divine sovereignty, an ending that was also a beginning. Thus, the 9 signs emerged: sky, sea, rivers, heavens, torment, war, and the final voice, each weaving threads between philosophy and prophecy. Some dismissed it as coincidence, a play of imagination. Others trembled at the possibility that an ancient thinker, centuries before the vision of John, had already sensed the tremors of eternity. And so the story lived on, whispered through generations, where philosophy met prophecy, and the words of Thales of Miletus stood like shadows beside the trumpets of Revelation, 9 signs echoing across the ages, binding reason and faith, logic and mystery, man and God, in a single, unbroken line of destiny. The whispers of the 9 signs did not fade with the passing of centuries. Instead, they grew louder, as if time itself was conspiring to make humanity remember what was once hidden. The alignment between Thales' insights and the biblical trumpets became a mystery pursued by scholars, mystics, and wanderers who believed the world was approaching a threshold. Those who sought the truth gathered fragments of ancient manuscripts, faded papyri, and sermons of forgotten preachers. They found patterns written in storms, carved in earthquakes, and sung by the winds over the oceans. Each event, each calamity, seemed to bring the old words to life. The first echoes were seen in the skies, when storms erupted with violence that shook the faith of entire nations. The hail that once fell in fleeting showers now came mixed with fire and strange red dust, as if the heavens themselves bled. Farmers spoke in trembling voices of ruined crops, while prophets declared, "This is the first sign." Thales saw the order, but Scripture saw the judgment. Soon the seas followed. Once sources of wonder and trade, the oceans turned restless. Great red tides stretched for miles, suffocating fish and staining the waves crimson. Sailors told stories of flames rising from beneath the water, as if the depths themselves had become a furnace. Thales had declared water as the origin of life, but now the world learned of its power to unmake. The second trumpet resounded through the cries of the oceans. Rivers, too, bore witness. Pure streams grew bitter, poisoned by unseen hands, and villages along their banks withered in thirst. The prophecy of wormwood was spoken aloud by pastors in deserted chapels, and people began to wonder if the philosopher's voice had somehow pierced eternity, warning of a truth far beyond his time. The third sign was no longer metaphor. It was life turned into death. Then came the darkening of the heavens. A third of the light was lost, not only in the skies above, but also in the hearts of men. Cities under eclipses grew silent, and the constellations that once guided sailors and shepherds were swallowed by veils of smoke and ash. Thales had trusted the stars to bring order, but now their absence carried dread. The fourth trumpet declared that even the heavens could be shaken, but it was the fifth sign that struck terror. Out of the shadows came plagues of torment unseen in generations. Strange locusts swarmed, not ordinary insects, but relentless waves of suffering that broke the will of the proud. Diseases with no cure spread like whispers of judgment, and men longed for death, but could not find it. Thales had searched for the hidden essence of things, but here the essence revealed itself as anguish. War followed, merciless and unending. Armies rose not for conquest alone, but as if driven by forces older than empires. Nations turned upon each other with weapons that scorched land and sky, and the rivers ran red once more, not by plague, but by blood. The sixth trumpet echoed across continents, and even those who did not believe in prophecy felt the weight of inevitability pressing upon them. And at last came the voice. The seventh trumpet did not bring silence. It brought a thunder that shook the very foundations of the earth. From temples, mountains, and even ruins, voices rose declaring that all kingdoms, all philosophies, and all powers belonged not to man, but to the eternal. It was the sign that Thales sought without knowing, the unity he had traced in stars and numbers, now revealed as divine sovereignty. The 9 signs stood complete, not as relics of the past, but as living truths written into history itself. To some, they were warnings of doom. To others, they were proof of a hidden order, where philosopher and prophet met across centuries. Humanity, caught between despair and awe, could no longer deny the resonance of those words. The signs of Thales of Miletus aligned with the trumpets of Revelation. And so the story continues, etched in storms, in oceans, in the silence of eclipsed skies, in the cries of war, and in the voices that declare the end of all kingdoms and the birth of a greater one. The world trembled as if creation itself had remembered the ancient pact between wisdom and prophecy. The 9 signs did not remain mere symbols in old scrolls. They unfolded like a living drama, each one striking the earth with greater force than the last. What Thales once observed with the eyes of a philosopher now thundered across nations, as if the heavens had chosen to reveal their final verdict. The sky burned first. Clouds split open with firestorms so violent they seemed alive, their thunder echoing like the blast of the first trumpet. Cities fell under hail and fire mixed with blood, and the earth cried out in pain. People looked upward, searching for answers, yet found only judgment descending from the heavens. It was as though the stars Thales once measured now rebelled against their own order. The seas followed in wrath. Great mountains of fire crashed into the oceans, stirring waves that devoured coasts and swallowed ships whole. Fishermen who once sang to the tides now wept at the silence of waters, turned crimson. The sea, which Thales revered as the womb of existence, revealed its other face, the grave of nations. Then came the rivers, poisoned and bitter. Entire valleys drank death instead of life, and those who once depended on flowing streams cursed their waters. Wormwood had fallen, and the bitterness spread not only through rivers, but also through the hearts of humankind. Faith wavered, trust shattered, and men turned against each other, thirsting for hope but finding none. Darkness swept over the fourth sign. A veil covered the sun, the moon, and the stars. Days shortened, nights grew endless, and despair spread like disease. Farmers feared their crops, sailors lost their maps, and children cried at the absence of light. The heavens, once the guide of Thales, no longer offered direction. Instead, they bore witness to cosmic silence. The fifth sign tore open the abyss. Shadows rose with torment like locusts, their sting sharper than steel, their cruelty greater than swords. Men ran, but there was nowhere to hide. Their cries filled the earth, yet death itself refused them. It was suffering unending, a reminder that some judgments are worse than death. The sixth sign roared like a storm of iron. Armies surged across deserts, seas, and plains, their weapons breathing fire, their numbers beyond count. Smoke covered the sky, and the ground shook with every march. A third of mankind fell in rivers of blood. Thales once pondered the nature of conflict, but here was war not born of man's will alone. It was unleashed as if by decree from beyond. And then the seventh trumpet sounded. The voice was not one but many, rising like thunder from heaven and earth alike. Temples crumbled, mountains split, and yet a chorus declared with unshakable force, "The kingdoms of this world are now the kingdom of the Eternal." Lightning flashed, earthquakes tore the soil, and every doubt was drowned in the revelation of divine sovereignty. The 9 signs stood complete. The order that Thales sought in stars, in numbers, in water, was finally unveiled, not as a philosophy, but as prophecy fulfilled. Reason bowed before revelation, and time itself bent under the weight of eternity. Those who had mocked trembled. Those who had believed wept with awe. The philosopher and the prophet, separated by centuries, now spoke with one voice across the ages. And the world, broken yet illuminated, understood at last. The wisdom of men and the trumpets of God were never enemies. They were two reflections of the same eternal truth, ringing together at the threshold of the end. The earth stood still. For a fleeting moment, silence swept across nations, as if every heartbeat paused to hear the echo of eternity. The fires that raged, the seas that boiled, the rivers that burned with bitterness, all froze beneath the weight of the final revelation. It was the calm not of peace, but of judgment fulfilled. The heavens themselves opened like a torn veil. Lightning split the skies into rivers of white fire, and thunder rolled with the power of countless voices speaking as one. Mountains bowed, their peaks crumbling into dust. Islands sank beneath the oceans, swallowed by waves that rose higher than towers. Every empire, every kingdom, every crown was stripped of meaning in that instant. Humanity, so proud of its strength, so confident in its wisdom, stood naked before the Eternal. Crowds lifted their eyes, some in terror, others in trembling hope. The philosophers, who had once debated truth in marble halls, now whispered Thales' name, realizing his search for order had never been in vain. The prophets, who had cried in deserts and streets, wept as their words burned alive in reality. Soldiers dropped their weapons, merchants their gold, rulers their thrones. None could stand against the voice that declared, "The kingdom of this world is mine." The 9 signs pulsed like a heartbeat through creation, binding past to present, man to God, wisdom to prophecy. The stars above, once measured by Thales with careful eyes, now shone with a brilliance unearthly, no longer guides for sailors, but flames of judgment and renewal. The oceans, which had roared with fury, grew still, reflecting a sky torn open by glory. The rivers, once poisoned, now flowed clear as crystal, as if the bitterness had been purged by fire. Darkness fled, chased away by a light not of sun or moon, but of the very presence of the Eternal. The torment ceased, the wars ended, not by treaties of men, but by the voice that silenced all voices. And then came a sound unlike any other, a final blast that was not merely heard, but felt in every cell, every stone, every breath of creation. It was the sound of completion, the last trumpet sealing the bond between time and eternity. The 9 signs of Thales of Miletus, once whispers of philosophy, now stood revealed as pillars of prophecy. What was sought as knowledge became revelation. What was studied as reason became destiny. And the world, trembling yet reborn, entered the threshold of a kingdom without end. Indeed, so the end unfolded like a tapestry set ablaze by the hand of eternity. Forests that had once whispered in green silence now trembled, their trees bowing as if in prayer, their roots quaking beneath the thunder of the final trumpet. Deserts, vast and unyielding, rippled like seas of fire and sand, their dunes collapsing as though they too awaited the voice that commanded the universe. Cities stood frozen, towers of steel and glass cracking as if they were made of clay, streets filled with multitudes who raised their eyes skyward, some screaming, some singing, all overwhelmed by the same revelation, that every kingdom of men was nothing more than dust before the eternal. The oceans, which had roared in judgment, grew calm, their waves reflecting the brilliance of a light beyond the sun, as though the waters themselves had been purified. The earth released its final breath of resistance, and creation exhaled into silence. In that silence, every creature, beast of the field, bird of the air, child in the cradle, elder at the edge of life, felt the weight of truth descend like fire and the tenderness of eternity wrap like light. The 9 signs were not merely warnings, but a bridge, carrying humanity from the shadows of reason into the brilliance of revelation. Thales of Miletus, the philosopher who once sought order in stars and water, was vindicated across the ages. His search for the unity of all things found its answer not in numbers nor in theories, but in the final voice that declared dominion. The trumpets of prophecy and the wisdom of philosophy were no longer 2 separate rivers. They had converged into one eternal sea. And as the last echo faded, the world stood renewed. No more war, no more torment, no more night. A kingdom without end stretched across creation, where light was life and life was eternal. The 9 signs had fulfilled their purpose, to awaken, to warn, and finally, to deliver. The trumpets were silenced. The philosopher's whispers were complete, and all that remained was the song of eternity, carrying the world into a dawn that would never fade.